Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Mirana. So Mirana is a support hero that mainly plays position 4, and she certainly can play 5, kind of like Pudge can play 5, and people do that, but I personally don't love it. Like, if you see a Pudge 5 or you see a Mirana 5, you're kind of like, eh, or even, something else like a Rubik 5, it just doesn't feel great because their spells aren't as reliable, and so you'd rather pair that with a stronger laner, someone that's tanky or has a stun to set up like an offlaner. So that's usually why they would play position 4. And then Mirana's kind of unique, or at least she was unique, because she can play more of a real right-click core build, and that's something that is sort of out of style. People don't really play Mirana carry anymore, or Mirana mid. It's something that they do occasionally, but it's kind of something from a long time ago in Dota that's really not nearly as popular anymore. But it is possible. That is something she can do, and it's actually not as unique as it was, because we've seen a lot of these, hoodwinks and muertas and stuff like that be these 4 positions that just go right-click anyway. So it's just becoming something that is happening to a lot more heroes, but she's kind of the classic hero that's always been able to do those kinds of things. And then overall, as a support, Mirana is a very team-oriented support. Her stun requires some sort of setup, meaning like another hero has to usually stun first or something like that, and that's the best way to secure your stun. Obviously, you can hit your stun otherwise, but it's sort of like I said with Pudge before, where his hook in the 5 position doesn't feel great. It's sort of the same with Mirana, is you're not going to reliably hit your stun every time you cast it, and so that's why it's team, based and oriented in that way. And then her ultimate is a global team ability, and so it gives her entire team invis, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. But obviously that is very team centric. It's like it's a giant smoke gang for everybody, or it's a way in team fights to make it harder for the enemy to deal with you. But at the same time, even though she's team focused in those aspects, she also is kind of independent because she has a great escape. She's elusive. She can kind of get in and out. She can also clear waves pretty quickly and those kinds of things. So it's one of these heroes that's a little bit dynamic, like kind of half of the way you play her and half of her spells are very team oriented, and the other half are very independent. So in order to get the most out of the hero, it kind of can be difficult. Like the very basic abilities and the very basic way to play her in the lane and in the game, it's kind of straightforward. Like you can honestly just press your ultimate, and that can sometimes win you games. But to get the most out of her, it can be pretty difficult. It is skill based, and you need some experience. But before we can understand how to play Mirana, we have to take a look at her abilities. So now that we understand Mirana in general, we can take a look at her abilities and see how she's able to be that kind of team-focused hero, but also pretty independent as well. So first, we're going to take a look at Starstorm, and this is a pretty straightforward ability. You just kind of click it, and then some damage comes out in an AoE, and you can see there are a bunch of hits that hit this axe, but that's really because he's the only hero and the only enemy in this AoE. So if we spawn another couple of them, let's just spawn 2 more, and then we can just press this again with free spells, and we can see that, every enemy gets damaged in there, but then another Starstorm hit actually hits this axe twice. And so if we go over here, we can see that it hits this axe twice. So it's really based on the proximity that your actual hero is to those creeps or those enemies. And so this is important because it is a good harassing ability, it's a good farming ability, but it's one of those kind of like a Storm Spirit or a Lesh where you actually have to be kind of in the action. It's not like a cast from range ability. You have to be right next to the creeps, you have to be right next to the enemies, so it makes you a little bit vulnerable in that sense. So that's why this hero isn't always reliable in terms of even outputting harass damage. And then the stun is also not reliable, which we'll look at next, which is Sacred Arrow, because this is a pretty like slow moving stun. You just cast the arrow and the arrow comes out, and it's pretty obvious. You can see it coming, and then once it hits, it stuns for a decent amount of time. It does some damage as well, and the further you are away, the longer it actually stuns for. So you can see if I stun from this far away, that's a very long duration that it's stunning, and so it can be very, very good if you hit it, but obviously it's hard to hit it, and if the enemy sees it coming, like they're just going to walk out of the way pretty obviously. And then you can see if I just cast it here, I can still do damage and stun, so you can still cancel TPs and stuff like that, but it's just not going to stun as long. It's not going to be as effective, so you're not going to want to use it in that way as much. And then the last thing to mention about the arrow is that it's just inevitable. You're going to get into games where none of your allies pick stuns, and yes, you have an arrow, but you need something to set it up, so you're just going to have to solve that by buying items for yourself to set it up. And so there's 2 items you're going to be buying, either Rod of Atos, which is pretty straightforward. You're going to just root them, then you can cast the arrow, but they can dispel that or get forced away or something like that. Obviously, Atos is pretty good because right now when I'm making this, it scales into a more right-click-like item for the hero, so that definitely is an option. But especially as a support, you're probably more often than not going to be going for a Yule Scepter. So you might be wondering, well, how does that work? Because yes, they cyclone into the air, but how is that securing your stun? Well, actually, when you use this on an enemy, if you cast your arrow and they land right on top of your arrow, then there's pretty much nothing they can do and they just instantly get stunned. So it's a great way to secure your arrow. So you can use this on the axe, and then you can see I cast this, and as soon as he lands right on top of it, instantly stunned. And so that's a great way to secure yourself if there are just no stuns, no setups on your team. Now the other way to use this, you can see I didn't get much stun there because obviously I wasn't that far away, because Yule's is a pretty close range ability. So the honest thing that you're going to be doing, honestly, most of the time is you're going to be casting this, leaping away, and then arrowing. It's a pretty kind of tight timing to get it perfect, but basically you just do what I'm about to do here. So you do this, leap away, and then arrow, and you can see I didn't even get it perfect that time because I was talking a little bit distracted, so I didn't leap away perfectly in time. So they did have a little bit of time to move or do something like that, so just keep that in mind. To get it perfectly, you're going to want to do this, leap away, arrow right at them, and then like you see even there was like a split second, it wasn't exact. So it is kind of a tight window, but usually you're going to be able to land those just with a simple leap away, just as you turn. Just the turn rate is really the biggest thing, because obviously you have to take the time to turn around and leap. So if you do that, leap away, and then cast arrow, that's a bit of a better one. You can see right there, he landed on it exactly. That's also because I was a little closer, so it's a lot harder to actually land that if you are doing the max range Yules, because it obviously takes more time when you leap away for the arrow to travel, so just keep that in mind. That's definitely a way to set up your arrow if you have no other way of setting it up on your team. So that's Sacred Arrow, that's Starstorm. You can see how they can be good abilities, but again, not very reliable. And then we have Leap. This is her independent ability, the one that makes her kind of more elusive, and it's pretty straightforward. You get 3 charges, you press it, and you just leap away. And you can go over cliffs, all that kind of stuff. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple like that. The other thing you can do is if you know, a hero's here, let's say you stun them or something happened, or you right-click them and you're like, oh, I still want to use arrow, you can obviously combine it by leaping away and then turning around and then arrowing, which is pretty good. It just makes the ability more effective. Then you can even leap back in, so it can be good in those kinds of ways. And then the other thing that this does is it also gives you move speed and attack speed. So that's important because, you know, if you jump in, and this is kind of what makes her allowed to be or able to be a right-click hero, is you can jump in and get that 100 attack speed bonus, which is kind of insane. I mean, 100 attack speed is a lot of attack speed, so it just allows you to, you can see if I'm right-clicking this axe here, you know, this attack animation is good, the attack speed's pretty good, but now I jump in, and I'm just attacking way faster, doing way more damage. It's just really, really good in that way. And then finally, we have Moonlight Shadow, which is the ultimate ability, and this is really straightforward. You honestly just press R, and then there's like a tiny little animation, and then you just get invis for your whole team. You can see this allied axes over here. Obviously, the creeps aren't affected, but every hero on your team just now has invis, which is obviously great, and it lasts for a pretty long time, you can see, and you obviously get bonus movement speed as well here. So this is just really good for ganking, straight up, and also for escaping as well, and just being annoying in team fights, because it's just invis for everybody. And this is one of the big reasons I think why this hero is so popular, because especially at lower MMRs, like you don't even have to do anything. You can just press one button, and now you just like have an insane advantage in the team fights, and it's very, very hard for the enemy to deal with, especially when they don't buy dust and sentries and all those kinds of things. And you have dispel, so if you walk out of dust range, you know, now you're just free to go, free to escape, that kind of stuff. So it can be very, very powerful, but you can see how this is kind of dependent on the team in some way, but she also has a lot of escape ability, decent wave clearing ability to just kind of be on her own, independent in a way as well. And I'm not going to focus on the shard, but I will just actually mention the Ags, because it is something that's bought sometimes. The shard's just weird and nobody ever really buys it these days, I feel like. I mean, maybe people do sometimes, but it's just been changed so much recently that I'm just not going to focus on it. So, because I think it's going to be changed any minute. So the Ags upgrades your Sacred Arrow to now like basically include Starstorm. So you can see I shot it along the path here and it actually hit Starstorm and all these guys. So basically if I, you know, again, use this arrow, I can leap in, use Starstorm again. You know, that's a lot of damage that you're dealing, plus my attack speed. So it just kind of amps up everything this hero does, but just more with the magic damage route. And so that is something that you can play this hero more on a magic damage type of hero, where you're just going for this Ags and you're doing a lot of magic damage, but even so, you're always going to be scaling with the right clicks if you are a core, like a mid Mirana or something like that. So that's the Ags. And this kind of Starstorm thing where it's like adding Starstorm has always been something either with, you know, just Starstorm itself or with the Sacred Arrow. So they're probably going to keep that in there to some extent, unlike the Shard, which is just super weird. So anyway, that is Mirana. Those are her abilities. Now let's jump into a game and see how she's played. Now, in the same way that Mirana has kind of a dynamic way of playing where she has team-based abilities that need setup and stuff like that, but she also has independent abilities that allow her to do her own thing, the laning stage is kind of a dual aspect in that way as well. She has a very simple and obvious thing that she does, which is she just gets very aggressive, right-clicks people. She has a good right-click animation and stuff like that, and then she can get super aggressive and kind of out of position for most other supports, because then she can just leap away, or she can even leap in and get aggressive in that way. So it's very unique, but pretty straightforward, where it doesn't really take too much thinking. It's just like, okay, I'm going to get aggressive, I want to kill them, I'm not in danger, or I'm in danger, I need to leap away. But then the other thing that's a little bit more complicated, and obviously involves your team with setup and all that stuff, is hitting arrows in the laning stage. And so there's a few things you're going to want to know about hitting arrows in the laning stage. The first is that it's obvious. If you have a setup, just use the setup, use that stun and then cast arrow from range. But that's not always going to be the case. It's not always going to be reliable. And so the other thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use fog and the trees to try to land some arrows by just casting it where the enemy actually doesn't see the arrow coming until the very last second. And so in the side lanes, that's a lot easier because there's just a lot of fog, there's a lot of trees, the lane is kind of small, and especially in nighttime when there's not as much vision, you're going to be able to hit those arrows, as long as you have some skill and you know what you're doing, pretty consistently. And one of the ways to do that actually is to kind of combine the arrow with a way of stunning and harassing with actually securing creeps, because the arrow will actually one-shot creeps. So you can use it in the jungle if you have nothing else to do, or you're trying to roam or something, get a rune or secure a rune. You can just use the arrow really quick to one-shot a big creep in a big camp, which is pretty good for getting gold. But actually the main way you're going to be using it is kind of tandem to secure range creeps while also trying to get a stun on the enemy core that's last hitting in lane, especially if they're melee. And so what you're going to do is you're going to want to position yourself kind of in the jungle somewhere and aim towards that range creep while the enemy's last hitting. And then you kind of have a win-win situation where if the enemy doesn't see it coming and it kind of, they're in front of the range creep, they just get hit, they get stunned, your offlaner can, follow up with a bunch of damage or whatever it is, their own stun. That's great. If not, then it hits the range creep, you get the last hit, you get the experience, and that's great. The only thing is obviously you have to be careful because you don't want to do it every single range creep. Maybe you might be griefing your offlaner, he might get mad, but otherwise it's pretty good. It's better than getting the range creep denied. So that's kind of the main thing you're going to want to do. Now obviously you can use the arrow to just try to get random, arrow hits from fog, and that is possible, and it's not something that's impossible to do. It's not like you shouldn't do that, but that is not very reliable, and it's one of those things where you'd almost rather just use that ability on a jungle creep if you're going to miss it. So just keep that in mind. So I would honestly secure range creeps to start off in the laning stage. Do that a lot. Just get good at doing that. Kind of mix it up and go on and build from there before you really start to or try to get too special and too cute with it. Then, after the laning stage, Mirana is pretty straightforward. She's great at protecting towers, so she can clear waves, push waves. It's really hard to gank her under a tower because she can obviously leap away in a billion different directions, leap over cliffs, all that kind of stuff. So she's great at protecting towers in that way. And then, obviously, she's going to be great at ganking because she can just press R, everybody's invis. She can go with, the offlaner or a support or a mid or whoever else has a stun or some way of ganking and just hunt down the enemy cores in the jungle because they're going to be jungling. That's just what's going to happen. And so if you find them, you kill them, and it's really straightforward, and you're going to probably have an arrow setup at that point as well. And so she's really, really good at doing that, and that's what you want to be focusing on. If you're not pushing a lane or defending a tower, you're going to want to gank with your team. And then in the late game team fights, you're just going to want to be as annoying as possible. That's really your main job. And the obvious way to do that is just to press the R button, and that makes everybody invis. And then let's just be honest, supports are not very good at buying dust in pubs. I mean, that's just a rule, a general rule. It almost doesn't matter what MMR you are, they just don't do it as well. They might do it a little bit better here and there. You might have the odd support that's just great at it, but you're going to win a lot of games just by pressing R, to be honest. That's going to happen because it's just so good to have everybody invis. If you run out of dust or sentry range and then you dispel the dust or whatever, and then you can just get away, your cores can get away even at low HP. It's so hard to chase you guys down. It's just so good to have that ability, and I honestly think that's one of the main reasons she is so popular even when she's not that good in the meta. And then the other thing you're going to want to be doing is just being annoying as possible with leaping in, being escapable, setting yourself up to do damage to the supports, just running in, stunning them, ulzing them, right-clicking them down, because that is what Mirana does. Her ability to be a right-click carry, even if you're not buying right-click items, allows her to kind of be one of these annoying heroes that can still dish a lot of damage out. I mean, 100 attack speed is not nothing, and the Starstorm is not nothing, so you're going to want to sometimes, just solo kill supports, 1v1 a support in the backline and kill them. Or maybe that's not really your job, you just want to be extremely annoying to the enemy mid or something like that, because you can use them, you can stun them, you can right-click them a bunch, you can do all these super annoying things, and if they try to turn on you, they try to go on you, you just leap away. It's really that simple. You might not be as elusive as, let's say, a Puck, but you're still elusive and hard to deal with, and you're kind of one of these poking and prodding heroes that just, if the enemy tries to deal with you, it almost feels like they're just wasting too many resources. And so that's mainly what you're going to want to be doing with Mirana, but honestly, pressing R is half the battle. Let's just be honest about that. And that, everyone, is my Mirana guide. If you liked the video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.